Welcome to Biology of Stress. Here I'll give you an overview of what we'll be doing in this course. The required textbook for this course is White Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky. Robert Sapolsky is a renowned scientist in the field of neurobiology and stress physiology. And this book is written for the general public. This is a nonfiction science communication book that will be very accessible for you as biologists and scientists. In this book, Sapolsky is summarizing the information from a range of animal studies and some human studies and put them together in a way to explain how stress affects human physiology. So this book is very important for this course and provides a lot of the background and especially the framework of how to think about stress physiology from an evolutionary perspective. So please order your copy right now so that you have it available for the semester. In addition to Sapolsky's book, we'll also be reading the scientific literature on stress, a lot of it of what Sapolsky is mentioning in his book as well, and also some newer and more recent research. And for the beginning, especially where we need some additional background, we will be using some chapter sections from OpenStax, which is a free educational resource. And the chapter sections will be linked on Canvas, so you can just access them from there. So what are the expectations for this course? We won't have any exams in this class, but we will have weekly play posits, which will have questions that are graded based on correctness. We will also have weekly readings. There will be several weekly readings in this class. In addition to reading 1 or 2 chapters from Robert Sapolsky, we will be reading about 2 scientific literature articles. So there is a good amount of reading every week. And from these readings, you will be preparing weekly written summaries. And finally, there will also be 2 main capstone projects. So what are the goals for this course? There are 2 main goals. The first one is to get acquainted with the seminal literature on stress biology. So this includes the overall view from Sapolsky's book, but also the readings from the scientific articles that we'll be reading every week that you'll be preparing this written summaries every week. And the capstone project for this is to write a 2-page scientific background where you will summarize the literature, that part of it that we read as part of the class, but you will also be doing your own research and finding related articles to use as your scientific background. And the other goal for this course is to reflect on how stress affects you and affects society. And so for that, you will be doing weekly discussions, and you will also be preparing a policy poster in which you will propose a policy that will help alleviate stress either in a population of humans or in a group of animals, and how your policy will reduce stress in that group. So you'll have a choice of between humans or vertebrate animals. The physiology that we'll be talking about here applies to all mammals and most vertebrates, but it does not apply to invertebrates. They are a little bit different. And it also does not apply to plants. So please choose between either vertebrate animals or humans. And so on that topic of animal studies, we will be reading a variety of animal studies. And the reason why animal studies are important is because you can do in animals things that you will never be able to do in humans. You can take the offspring from one female rat and switch them with the offspring of another female rat, and that will be something that is impossible to do with humans. So there is information about human studies, but most of it happens through correlation, because you cannot have a completely controlled experiment in humans. But you can look at things that happen naturally, such as it just happened that 2 twins were split at birth and sent into very different families, and you can see how their environment of being raised in those different families affect them. But there will be a whole suite of other things that are also happening that you have no control over. So the information from human studies is fairly limited and is more about correlation. So it shows us that these 2 things are together, but you cannot really determine a cause and effect, which is the main objective of science. Is not just to find that these things happen, but explain why they happen. So that is something that you can do in animal studies, where you can subject a group of animals to one treatment and the other group to a different treatment, And at the end of the experiment, you can say this is the only thing that was different between them. So this is the likely cause for why we observed this. And even in that case, even when you have a fully controlled experiment and you're only changing one variable, we never in science say we prove that this happened. We never use the word proof, because in science it's really impossible to prove something. It's very easy to disprove something. So if you think, oh, this is going to happen, and you do the experiment and that doesn't happen, then you can say, well, that is proof that that was the cause. But to prove something is very difficult because there's so many other variables that could be taking place, some of them that you might not even be aware that they're happening. So when you look at one study, you never say, oh, this one study proves that this happens. That's, again, not possible to do. And there could be other conditions going on, things that are happening. Maybe you look at those animals specifically at a point in their life where they were more vulnerable to this, or something else was happening that was influencing the results. So you can never be sure that that's exactly what's causing the effects that you're seeing. So we take an approach where we look at many, many different studies, and then we try to put them into context and saying, okay, this study was done in this circumstances, this other study was done in this circumstances, and then together we try to build a framework of what is the thing that is going on. So that is why it is important to look at many different studies. And not only it is important to look at many studies in different groups, and most of the lab animals are rats and mice, but even if you find that something happens in rats and mice, that might not be entirely applicable to humans. We are quite different from a mouse. So in that case, it's important to look at studies from a broad range of animals and then try to understand them from an evolutionary perspective. So it's like, how closely related are these animals? For instance, if you find that a phenomenon is present in all mammals, humans are mammals too. So you can say, well, this probably applies to humans as well because we see it in all other mammals that we've studied. Or you can see it from a life history perspective. All organisms that have this type of life history, for instance, organisms that are very short-lived, tend to have this thing. Or organisms that are predators and have this type of physiology, you observe this. So then you can make some assumptions that maybe that is something that will be present in other animals that have that same type of life history. So that's why it's important to not just look at studies in a few animals, but also look at a wide range of animals. And we'll be looking at studies in fish and birds and other organisms. All right, so I think we're gonna have a lot of fun in this class, although the topic of stress might not sound like a fun topic. But I hope with this, you will learn about how your own physiology works and how you can control the stress in yourself, and also how it impacts society at large.